Welcome to video 5.5a, Properties of Quadrilaterals. There's a lot going on in this one, so I've got some things drawn here. So you've got this figure in your notes with all of these different types of quadrilaterals. Then on the next page, you've got this chart for properties. We've got it specified, each different column is a different quadrilateral, and here are the properties. I've written some additional properties for the isosceles trapezoid and the kite, and I've also given you an example of how you do this in the proofs. So let me show you how to fill out this chart. So what I'm going to do is start with the parallelogram, and notice these are all parallelograms, these are not. In the chart, put a line here, these are parallelograms, these are not. All right, I'm going to start with the parallelogram first. It looks like opposite sides are parallel, that's how we define it, so I'll put a check mark there. Opposite sides congruent. Opposite angles congruent, yes. A pair of consecutive angles supplementary. So consecutive, I mean one right next door. So this angle and this angle are supplementary. This angle and this angle are supplementary. You can kind of look at it like this is a small one and a big one. So yes. Diagonals perpendicular does not appear to be so. Diagonals bisect each other. So it does look like this chunk and this chunk are congruent, and this chunk and this chunk. Not all four, but just they bisect each other. Diagonals congruent, no, that one looks longer. They do not seem to, so those are the properties for parallelograms. Then right away, all of these things are also parallelograms, so they inherit those properties. So check, 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 check. Okay, then if you want, we can deal with these two. Equilateral, all sides congruent. Oh, a rhombus and a square. Okay, so a rhombus and a square. Equiangular, all angles congruent. Oh, rectangle, all 90, and a square. Okay, so now let's talk about some of the other things. So we'll go to rectangle now. So the parallelogram one is kind of done. The rectangle. Let's see if a rectangle has anything besides what I've already mentioned. It does look like the diagonals are congruent. That is a property. So diagonals congruent, that's for a rectangle. A lot of students think that the diagonals bisect the angles. Hopefully you can see that's a skinny angle and that's a wide angle, so that's not going to be the case. They're not perpendicular. Okay, so I'm going to say that's it for rectangles. Since a square is a rectangle, the square will also get credit for that. Okay, let's go to rhombus. For the rhombus, it does appear as though the diagonals are perpendicular. That is the case. So diagonals perpendicular, that's the rhombus. Once the rhombus gets it, the square does as well. One more point, the kite also has diagonals that are perpendicular. So as long as I'm talking about that, I'll check mark the kite. Okay, so I think, diagonal bisects the angles. That does happen for a rhombus. Hopefully you can see that angle and that angle, that angle and that angle. So diagonal bisect the angle. Again, I'll go rhombus, and again, square gets all those. So the square has everything. Okay, now let's focus our attention on these over here. So trapezoid, I don't think there's anything special going on there. Isosceles trapezoid, it does appear as those diagonals are congruent. So I will mention that for isosceles trapezoid. I've got these over here. It does work out that this lower base angle and this upper base angle are supplementary. So let's see if I've got consecutive angles supplementary. So that would be for isosceles trapezoid. Okay, let's see what's going on with Mr. Kite. Where do you get the diagonals being congruent? Let me do a quick check to see that I haven't forgotten anything here. I'd hate to have to redo all this. That looks good. So again, if you're doing a proof, if you wanted to have something saying that, oh, I know that I'm a rectangle, so I can then conclude that these diagonals are congruent, in the proof you'd say, if rectangle, then diagonals congruent. If square, then diagonals bisect each other. If isosceles trapezoid, then a pair of consecutive angles are supplementary, and so on. And again, there was a typo in your notes that said isosceles triangle, it should be trapezoid. So there you have it, how to look at figures and kind of come up with the properties and try to remember them as best as possible.